Welcome, friends, to another episode of the Lifestyle Empowerment Podcast. So on today's episode, let's talk a bit about ADD and ADHD. So we'll get into kind of what is ADD and what is ADHD. They do differ by scientific term a little bit, but we'll also get into what may be causing this, as well as how can we naturally treat these. I'm not going to talk about the drug. I'll bring up the drugs, but I'm not going to talk about like using the medications to address ADD or ADHD. We're going to talk more natural ways, which is less sexy, but is the long-term solution. So by definition, very simplistically put, ADD is a slow brain, where ADHD is a fast brain. And so the importance of understanding that is going to help you actually assess which route you should take when addressing this. A lot of us suffer from ADHD rather than ADD. ADD would be more under the circumstances of prolonged exposure to things and just over time, one becoming fatigued. And I'll get into the mechanisms a little more, but ADHD, we are in such a hustle and bustle environment. There's just so much going on around us. So we're kind of like all over the place, like the squirrel brain and whatnot. You also hear it a lot as kids. Children have ADHD. And now children are usually quite hyperactive. Being young, you have the energy to be hyperactive. So we label these children as ADHD. Now, with that being said, yes, in today's society, ADHD is quite on the rise, and that is due to our technology and whatnot, which I will get into. But for me, when I was a kid and people said that I had ADHD, for me, I just wasn't interested in certain topics. Ironically enough, I hated school. I hated learning. I didn't have any interest in it whatsoever. I just wanted to be physical, do physical things, running, jumping, playing, working, all that kind of stuff. I had no interest in sitting there reading from a textbook. And then that completely, obviously flipped as I grew up. And now all I do is read from textbooks and research papers and take courses and pay attention in class. And so just as a child, I just was never interested in that. I wanted to be a soccer player. I wanted to be an athlete. But I was diagnosed, quote unquote, diagnosed with ADHD. And so they wanted to medicate me. And I believe my mother never had. Maybe if she did, things would be different. But anyways, let's joke. So at that point, it was, okay, what are you just not interested in this? And the same goes for now, and especially in adults. But when you look at some of the biggest causes of ADHD, it is our technology. It is iPads. I see kids now, as young as, 3 years old, working iPads better than some adults. And so what happens now is, scrolling, watching videos close to the screen, but then doing random other things all over the place, the multitasking, this can really create those ADHD symptoms. I think I've been shouting her out a lot, but I had my guest, Dr. Rachel Fontaine, in my podcast a couple episodes ago, and she has a very technical term as to what's occurring with children using iPad. So you probably want to check that out. I couldn't give you the timestamp at the moment right now, but she had a good insight on what happens when we are giving our children iPads, for example, and then their development and whatnot. So that'd be a cool thing to check out if you're interested. But when we look at, from my perspective, what something like technology does, is it just depleting resources is how you look at it. It depletes, in a child, it depletes resources. It depletes resources in an adult as well, but it also causes a lot of stress, especially things like Instagram, due to the comparison. And then that stress is going to create an ADHD symptom. So this is where technology is a really big thing, plus multiple things. Like how many of us are watching TV while playing on our phone? I am extremely guilty for that when I get around to watching TV. So I can't say anything there. I do my best to stop, mainly because I'm not like super interested in what TV has to offer. So I'll glance at it, or I'm putting a show on that I've already watched 100 times. And then I go on my phone and text people or look things up and whatnot. And so you don't want to do that, because that's more for your brain to do. So it's more resources depleted. And then we are in a society where we're having trouble replenishing these resources, whether that be due to the stomach issues and we're getting poor malabsorption of food, or whether it's just due to poor nutrients in food or just eating poor foods that are not providing the necessary substrate to address this situation. And so ultimately technology plays like a really, really big role. When was the last time you had gone to the bathroom without bringing your phone? Everywhere we go, we have our phones and we can't be away from them. You go to the bathroom and you forgot your phone and it's like the worst experience ever, people will say, and I can attest to that. You're just sitting there like, you have to be bored though, right? And we'll get into that. But so technology is a big culprit of creating ADHD symptoms. Anyone I know with remember ADHD is the hyperactive form, we will call it. Anyone I know that has those symptoms are always on their phone. They're always very busy running around doing multiple things and whatnot. And they are going to spew of those symptoms because they are depleting their resources and not replenishing them. So that is number one, is looking at technology. Pretty much a close number one, but we'll say number two is our environment, our food, our water, all the things that are damaging the gut. So I created a dopamine series. I'll take it here. And in this dopamine series, I talk about neurotoxicity affecting dopamine. So when we look at gut dysbiosis, whether it's a bacterial overgrowth, whether it's a damaged mucosal lining, whether it's bacterial pathogens, whether it's SIBO, whether it's parasites, worms, they're all going to create brain inflammation. And this is going to give you a ton of ADHD symptoms. And the basic way of looking at, okay, what is ADHD? It's both low or high dopamine is how you could look at it, more so on the low spectrum. But what a lot of people don't talk about, and I've created posts about this, is acetylcholine. So we're going to take dopamine. A dopamine is our engine. It's our horsepower. That is our get stuff done neurotransmitter. So this is why individuals who take things like Ritalin, Ativan, Dexedrine, Vyvanse, they're more motivated to get things done. But what happens now, if you refer back to my last podcast on psychedelics, where psychedelics can downregulate receptors within the brain in terms of serotonin and increase enzymes that break down serotonin, the same thing occurs with dopamine when using medications. So this is where people need more and more dosage or feel really bad after being on them for an extended period of time. So let's look at dopamine as your engine, your horsepower. Then acetylcholine is your gas pedal. It's your regulator of that engine. So if you had like a really big engine, but a small gas pedal, you're going to have trouble regulating that. And it's highly unlikely you're going to have a huge gas pedal and a small engine, but you can have both. So look at it as we need to be able to control our engine. And this is where I believe the medical community is it's not going wrong, but it's negating. They're not focusing on acetylcholine because you could take all the Vyvanse, you could take all the Ritalin, you could take all of these and you'll see acute improvements, but prolonged, you didn't address that root cause, whether it was the gut inflammation leading to low levels of acetylcholine. That gut inflammation as well, and going back to technology, especially for adults and that comparison and those immense amount of stress, creating that pessimist, the negativity is going to affect the methylation cycle. And in regards to acetylcholine production, you need adequate amounts of methylation in order to create acetylcholine to provide that for the brain. Acetylcholine is your learning and focus neurotransmitter. That is, it transitions of brain waves, it helps with muscle contractions, but that is the one where when I give people alpha GPC, they tend to have a better response in terms of focus and energy rather than dopamine stuff. Now there's choline CDP. Now choline would be more geared towards the smooth, steady focus, where alpha GPC, I would recommend more like pre-workout or something like that, or an event if you're standing up and speaking with people and whatnot. But if you need to sit down at a desk and look at something, I would recommend choline CDP. So I'll recap that on the end with the interventions we can use to improve these ADHD symptoms. But that's how we have to look at it. Is we have to look at, yes, we have to look at our dopamine, but we also have to look at our acetylcholine. We also have to look at all the other neurotransmitters as well. We don't want to just isolate one thing. So at the end of the day, this is why gut health is so important, because the neurotoxicity is going to create, resulting in a reduction of all of your neurotransmitters. Because then we have GABA, which is your brake. It's going to slow you down. It's going to calm you down. That's why meditation promotes GABA. And then you're going to have your serotonin, which is like the alternator on your car. It's what recharges your batteries. For those that don't know, that's what an alternator does. And that is going to help us build more dopamine and acetylcholine, give us more building blocks, as well as the metabolic function for decreasing inflammation, resulting in better dopamine and acetylcholine production, resulting in better methylation, resulting in better acetylcholine production, okay? So that's how we look at it. And so the biggest culprits of our ADD and ADHD symptoms is technology and gut inflammation, gut dysbiosis. I use the word gut dysbiosis as a very broad thing. And that's why when I go off, I list off, several different things. Just anything that is harming the gut, to me, is gut dysbiosis. The medical community may have a different definition, but when I refer to gut dysbiosis, I am referring to anything that is disrupting the gut health. So whether that's a low normal commensal flora, bacterial overgrowth, everything I mentioned previously, that to me is gut dysbiosis. So when we are dealing with gut dysbiosis, we're going to have a lot of cognitive issues, especially because of the vagus nerve. That's how your brain speaks to your organs. And think of it as rush hour traffic when there is gut inflammation present. You're not getting very far. There's poor communication. There's a lot of honking and beeping going on, right? So this is where it's important to address the guts. But technology is going to affect the guts, because when we are going through this technology, we're flipping through TikTok really fast and Instagram and whatnot, we are doing these comparison things, we are probably converting a lot of dopamine to adrenaline. And then this adrenaline is going to be pushed through the gut, creating more inflammation, damaging more of the mucosal lining, feeding more pathogens, exacerbating this neurotoxicity, this neuroinflammation. And so this is why avoiding your phone as much as you can, understandably so, some of us need it, myself included. That is pretty much what my business is ran off of. I understand that part, but you have to take time in the day to just relax, to just stay away from your phone. People call it, what do they call it? Like the phone detox or the social detox or something. I highly, highly agree with those. So those would be a great addition to your daily routine to help address your ADHD symptoms. Now, obviously, it's not as simple as just putting your phone away and then hoping for the best. Like, it can actually make drastic differences, especially at night when it comes to sleep. So we go on our phones. We're not worried about ADHD at night because we're just relaxing. We don't need it because we're not working. But it's going to affect your GABA, your melatonin, and your serotonin. So then you're not going to have this recharging effect to have better neurotransmitters the next day. So even at night, that's why it's so important to stay off your phone 90 minutes before bedtime, or at least don't be engulfed in your phone and scrolling through a bunch of stuff and whatnot. Also on the account of, I've always said to stay off your phone at night and first thing in the morning. Yes, all the scientific, technical terms, etc., but you might find something that could really piss you off. Somebody might text you something and really upset you, and now you're going to have trouble sleeping. Or you might wake up in the morning, read your text messages. Somebody said something that really upset you, and now you're furious, and your day started off on the wrong foot. And then that in return is going to give you tons of ADD and ADHD symptoms. So your phone, your technology is a really big issue. TV, for me, as long as you are wearing blue light blocking glasses, or you have some sort of option on your TV to turn on that blue light blocking mechanism. I don't know if TVs have that or not. I think some of them do. I don't know. But that is okay, because then it helps people relax. It kind of fills that void of them not playing on their phone. So for example, what I do is I always put a movie on my iPad when I go to bed, but I don't look at it. I don't watch it. It's a movie that I've seen 7,000 times, but the sound is there because then I don't sit there and focus or have the urge to grab my phone or check something or whichever. And that's another reason why you want to be like 90 minutes before bed, because if you're texting, a really hot guy or a really hot woman, and you keep checking your phone to see if they responded, you're going to want to keep flipping over to see if they responded. Or if you were in an argument with somebody, this is why you want to put it away, so you have time to calm down and not forget, but just not want to continue to engage yourself in a specific conversation, right? Or, a sporting event or something. Like, this is why 90 minutes before bed is very important. This is also why waking up in the morning to really help prevent ADD and ADHD symptoms is staying away from your phone, because I've always said that when you go on your phone and you start scrolling, you've now programmed your brain to want to scroll, because it built a bit of dopamine, which was already lacking, and now it's trying to maintain that dopamine throughout the day. So unless you go out and do other things to build that dopamine, you're going to try to use your phone to build that dopamine. So a lot of that stuff would make more sense. I won't get too technical in this podcast, but if you check out that dopamine series that I created, that can make a lot more sense if you are interested in this podcast, helping understand your ADD and your ADHD symptoms. So by doing these technology detoxes, however you want to call them, those can greatly help improve these symptoms. As well as mentioned, it's going to reduce cortisol levels, it's going to improve GABA and serotonin, it's going to improve melatonin, and that in return is going to help your gut. Because there are many, many ways we can address supplementally ADD and ADHD, but if you're not addressing that root cause, which unfortunately is out of the scope of this podcast, but if you're not addressing that root cause, then you're not going to have drastic benefits when taking said supplements. You may have them acutely, especially if you are super malnourished. I've always said, if you are someone who takes, for example, magnesium bisglycinate is supposed to be calming. It's supposed to calm the central nervous system, which once again can really help with ADHD symptoms. If you get revved up taking magnesium bisglycinate, that is showing you how deficient you are in that. Same with things like glutathione, because all of a sudden the liver's like, oh, sweet, I can get some work done now. And you might have some like negative symptoms, which are part of the process. Just because you negatively respond to something does not mean it doesn't work for you. That is where you are being told, your body's telling you, hey, I'm super deficient in this. So that's another one, is magnesium bisglycinate, for example. It can be really good for these ADHD symptoms. If you take care of that situation, you can see drastic changes in those symptoms. That for me especially, like the days that I am trying to get computer work done, texting my clients first thing in the morning, running around with the dogs, trying to get everything ready, trying to clean up, whichever, all day is practically a scatterbrain. And if I ate poor food the day before, processed food the day before, it's just a scatterbrain. It's just symptoms to the max for me, right? Everybody's individual. My goal, I've always said this to people, my goal is to be the smartest individual in the room. So at the slightest bit of ADHD, I think it's the worst thing ever. So for someone, it might be a drastic improvement when I experience ADHD, or for anyone else, right? So it's very subjective. But for me, staying off my phone first thing in the morning is what really benefits me in terms of that. Because if I'm just being fully upfront and honest, people really piss me off. And so staying off my phone really helps me engage. Meditation, the first thing I do as soon as I wake up is I have one of those wake up lights, and I turn on the sunrise option, which is relatively fast in this case. And then I sit there and I perform breathing exercises. I do 7, 7, 7. So 7 seconds in, 7-second hold, 7-second release. And I do that for like 5 minutes while I play with my dog's ears or something like that. So a very calming waking routine is what I try to achieve. Because if I do not achieve that, if I'm flying out of bed because I'm late, or because I checked my phone and, was overly texting somebody first thing in the morning, then my brain is quite scattered. And then I have trouble, kind of getting out of that routine, out of that situation, because of that dopamine spike first thing in the morning. And then my brain tries to maintain that all day. Now, why was I deficient in dopamine though? Was it because I ate poorly the day before? Was it because I was on my phone too much the day before? So that is important to remember too. Things that you did 4 days ago can affect you today in terms of things like this. Because I had lots of clients who will travel or something like that. And then all of a sudden, 5 days after being home, something really bad happens, or to them is really bad. And they just, I don't know why I've been perfect. It could take time for these things to occur. So what you did the night before, what you did 3 nights before, that could affect you that day. So why I'm saying this is to take that into account, so to not freak out, right? Okay, yeah, I remember on Wednesday it's Wednesday now. On Sunday, I had a couple drinks. I had a couple beers and I had some pizza. It might not hit you until Wednesday. And then all of a sudden you're having, okay, why can't I focus today? Why am I so scatterbrained? Oh yeah, on Sunday, I went out with some friends. I had alcohol and I had pizza, I had dairy. This is why, right? Usually it affects you the next day if it's bad, if you have a bad enough situation. But if you're all right, it can be a couple days before it affects you. So it's important to understand that when it comes to, well, anything, but in this context, ADD and ADHD symptoms. So now, when we're looking at ADD, there's going to be like possible adrenal fatigue. There's going to be low neurotransmitters. There's going to be cellular inflammation. There's going to be a lot going on to really slow the brain down because the brain is like always trying to function. So ADD is much, much more rare than ADHD by medical definition. It is much, much more rare. So as mentioned, it's a slow brain. Think of it as a slow brain. So you still, yes, want to heavily focus on acetylcholine, but this is where we really want to focus on dopamine and your adrenals and like your thyroid and whatnot. So that goes for ADHD as well. But in this context, we probably are dealing with hypothyroidism, whether it's high levels of reverse T3 or just poor conversion due to gut and liver health. And then we are looking at probably the neurotoxicity, but with the adrenals, they're probably not, it's not that you're not, because I made a thing on adrenal fatigue. A lot of people don't actually experience adrenal fatigue. What they're experiencing is cortisol resistance, so poor metabolism. So they're not really binding cortisol a lot to the cell. Cortisol binding globulin could be high. A lot of mechanisms occurring there. But that is more your ADD symptoms. So when it comes to ADD, that one is more addressed with the finding the root cause rather than acutely fixing it with medications. Like, yes, medications can help for sure, but you'll have a lot of people who are truly diagnosed with ADD, like they truly have ADD, they're not just saying that when they take medications like Vyvanse, Ritalin, Dexedrine, Adderall, etc., they don't notice the most drastic improvements. That's how you can pretty much know someone's got ADD, if they're not noticing massive improvements from a typical dosage of one of those medications. And that's because there's just so many other things going on that this medication isn't going to do a lot. And so then they just give them a huge dose. So then they get a response, but then they just feel absolutely awful when coming off of it. Another thing too is if you are somebody who gets anxiety from taking medications like that or anything that improves dopamine, then you are most likely dealing with ADHD and you're dealing with like high cortisol levels, high adrenaline, because you're converting. So that was me. And some days it still is, and if I'm not in check with my nutrition, is I will convert a lot of my dopamine to adrenaline, because every adrenaline molecule is once a dopamine molecule. I will convert a lot of that. I really speed up that enzyme, that process. So then anything that provides me dopamine, whether a specific nutrient, a food, the gym, a task, whichever provides me dopamine, something exciting, I convert it to adrenaline. And then my gut, I get super bloated and all that kind of stuff, right? But if everything's in check, I don't have that issue because my methylation is good and I'm not acting upon that gene that is causing that to increase or to speed up, sorry. So that is how you can kind of tell somebody's ADD or ADHD if they're unsure which one it is. It's pretty obvious though. Attention deficit hyperactive disorder is ADHD. Attention deficit disorder is ADD. So the hyperactive, it's pretty obvious which one's which. So if you have EOR, you're leaning more towards ADD. If you have Tigger, you're leaning more towards ADHD. So recap, if you are EOR, you are leaning more towards ADD. If you are Tigger, you are leaning more towards ADHD. So that's how I kind of say that. I'm sure a lot of us can be like, oh yeah, we're Tigger. So that is myself included. I get very hyperactive, especially around certain people, certain situations. That is a lot of adrenaline occurring. Doesn't necessarily mean it's ADHD though. It doesn't mean I can't focus. So it's important we're in a society where we like to label everything. We like to put a label on absolutely everything. And all of a sudden it's like, oh no, I had trouble reading this morning. I have ADHD. Or, I don't want to take responsibility for the fact that I don't eat properly or that I overtrain or that I'm on my phone too much. I just want to say that I have ADHD or I have ADD. You take responsibility. You're an adult for what you are doing with your life before you try to make a claim or have your doctor make a diagnosis that you have ADHD, because anybody can walk in and get diagnosed with ADHD. There's no test. There's no test that they run. I'm sure there might be, actually. They might, check certain levels. You could do Dutch tests to check hormones. You could do organic acid tests, and then that could define you as ADHD. But you're not ADHD. You are living a poor lifestyle. That's what it is. There's a mechanism in there that's occurring. As mentioned, whether you're overtraining, whether you're eating poorly, whether you're not sleeping enough, that's not an ADHD diagnosis. That's a I'm not taking care of my body diagnosis. Why this frustrates me is because we go in, we get diagnosed with ADHD, and then it's our crutch for everything, right? Oh, why are you late for work? Oh, my ADHD kicked in this morning and I lost track of time, right? Or why didn't this get done? Or why are you not doing this? Or why are you acting this way? Oh, I have ADHD, right? It's very infuriating to someone who works very hard to help people overcome these things. And then you have lazy individuals, arrogant individuals who don't want to make themselves better. They just want to have that label because it gives them, whether they can get the medication or whether it just is their crutch, is their get out of jail free card for everything. Because I know a lot of people who use that get out of free jail card. Oh, I have ADHD, so I can't do this, or this is why this happened or something. No, grow up, take responsibility. Apologize if I offend anyone, but that is just where I'm at with that, because I myself, and I work with many other people who work their butt off trying to better themselves. And then you have these other people who just live very poor lifestyles and then cry wolf about their situation. Anyways, tangent over. So let's look at how are we going to address ADHD symptoms? How are we going to manage them away from medication? Because I've mentioned in the past, when it comes to following a protocol to improve your health, wellness, vitality, cognitive performance, whichever it may be, address your gut situation, that is where I say, okay, medication like antidepressants might be applicable in this situation, because you could be so unmotivated and so depressed that you're not even going to begin to make the necessary steps to better yourself. It's not really the same with ADHD. You don't need to focus to put good food in your mouth, right? So you bettering your life doesn't involve studying, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, it does. I get it, going on the internet and finding things to do, even though it's full of stuff. But essentially what I'm trying to say is you don't need medication to help you address ADHD. Of course it's going to help. It's what it was designed for. It acts on dopamine pathways though, but negates acetylcholine pathways. So when I have people with ADHD symptoms, obviously we are looking at the gut. Is that saying goes, everyone has a gut issue until proven otherwise. And all disease starts in the gut. So I'm going to look at the guts first. Anyone that has ADHD symptoms, right? When you look at children, a lot of children have gut infections now. It's just the world we live in. There's just no way around it. It's just the reality that we experience. So this is why those ADHD symptoms and ADD symptoms are quite on the rise in children. Yes, as mentioned, technology and everything, but we got a lot of broken homes. We got a lot of poor food. We got a lot of poor environments. So we're just getting worse and worse every single year. So yes, a lot of children have ADHD symptoms. You don't want to medicate them, but it is very difficult working with children for several aspects. I do work with children. I have been lucky to have some very good children and some very good parents and putting their best foot forward and seeing tremendous results. But there are parents out there that are super busy, that are just stressed out. It's very difficult for them to try to get their child to do what needs to be done and whatnot. And so that is where they resort to medication. But this can be done without medication. But in context, we'll stay within context of adults. For my viewers, I don't really think any 4-year-olds are listening to the podcast. So we'll stay in context of adults. We're going to look at the guts and see what's going on there, right? If you come back, you take a GI map and you have a severe overgrowth of bacteria, that is, once again, out of scope of this podcast. But that has to be addressed. But that doesn't mean you cannot do things acutely to help improve these symptoms of ADHD, which I will get into. But as mentioned, they're not going to have the best effect compared to if you have taken care of the gut issue. If you come back and, your GI map's not looking too bad, but it's indicating that you have damaged mucosa lining, that there's a lot of gut inflammation, this is where we can look at things like deglycerinated licorice root, aloe vera gel, glutamine. Be careful with glutamine though, it can fuel immune cells. So that one's very subjective, but most people are okay with deglycerinated licorice root, so DGL, and aloe vera, and that can help quell that inflammation. Then there are gut soothing products out there. Nutridyne's got one known as GI Integrity, GI Revive from Designs for Health. There's products from Metagenics, one called Ultra Inflamex that could help. Once again, though, there are nutrients that can negatively react with these things. So always consult a professional, health expert, whichever, prior to partaking in any of these supplements. But essentially, some people get gut maps and it's just kind of indicating a lot of gut inflammation. So they can do a lot to decrease that. Everybody should do this. Everybody should do this. Everybody should be having aloe vera juice. Okay. Make sure it's from the cooler though, because it can be moldy and that can lead to things. So everybody should be doing aloe vera juice. Not everybody needs to do deglycerinated licorice root, but deglycerinated, that version is the safe version. So anybody could do deglycerinated licorice root. It's the glycerinated version that you have to be careful of because that's what's going to increase blood pressure. So if you are somebody who has a blood pressure condition, I do not recommend that. If you are somebody who does not and you have low energy, glycerinated licorice can help improve that energy. It blocks the enzyme that converts cortisol to cortisone. Different subject. Anyways, so deglycerinated licorice root, aloe vera. Once again, glutamine can be good, but it fuels immune cells. So if you are dominant in specific immune pathways, if you have a situation going on, it can make you worse. So you just want to be careful there. Dairy-free immunoglobulins could be really good for most individuals. They are very difficult to find here in Canada. The States, you can get them through Nutridyne or Nutrition Dynamic. So anything to just really quell that intestinal inflammation. This is why you will read or you may have experienced wicked cognitive performance from something like following a keto diet, because you are not feeding into that inflammation. It does not mean you are always fixing that inflammation. It does not mean that the brain loves ketones. The brain loves glucose, okay? I'm not going to go on that. Keto diet works in terms of cognitive performance for most individuals, though, because it is not feeding into gut distress, because the carbohydrates will feed bacteria. It will fuel more inflammation, higher levels of insulin. Carbs are not bad. There's something wrong with you that is going on that you need to address, but this is why keto does show great improvements for cognitive performance. So when I have so for example, this podcast, I would have ate by now, but I'm not going to eat because one, I'm not being super physically active, but I want that cognitive performance. I want that clear mind. I don't want it to be disrupted by potentially eating something that could create a little bit of gut inflammation, create some neuroinflammation, and then there goes my thought process. So that is where keto or fasting, which I do not like fasting though. If you talk to many of my clients, a lot of them will say fasting just does not work for them. A lot of them are Th2 dominant. A lot of them have cortisol issues, liver issues. They can't produce enough, so they produce too much cortisol, which leads to adrenaline, and fasting just does not work. I'm a person who cannot fast. It does not work. I don't build enough dopamine if I don't eat consistently, and then I binge eat. So I'll try, I'm going to fast today. So then all of a sudden 4 o'clock rolls around and I eat triple cheeseburger with a large ice cream or whichever. I cannot fast. It just does not work for me. Sure, I feel benefits in terms of cognitive performance, but I destroy it all with my behavior. So it doesn't work. I don't care what science says, what research says, it doesn't work. And I have many clients. I just had a consult the other day from someone from New York who mentioned that fasting just ruined them. And I know exactly why. I won't get into that. But so this is why I recommend keto. So keto can really help. But keto fat sources can be higher in histamine. And then that histamine is going to cause cognitive issues. So this is why when I do keto and I need the cognitive performance, depending where my guts are at, I will do just like beef and oil or something like that, because beef is going to contain nutrients that I'm about to get into that'll also really help with ADHD symptoms. So quelling the gut inflammation is a great place to start, whether that be using aloe vera juice, deglycerinated licorice root, glutamine, some gut health products, like GI Integrity or GI Revive, and maybe following a keto diet. Carnivore as well. I'm not super familiar with the actual definition of what carnivore is, because you hear some people are eating potatoes, you hear some people are eating honey. To my knowledge, I thought carnivore was just meat, no carbs or whatever. So if you're following that, once again, it's just no carbs. It's just no carbs are going to help improve cognitive performance. Acutely, they're going to help improve cognitive performance. Long term, they will not. They will mess up the thyroid, all sorts of things. So carnivore could be another way as well. You'll hear a lot of people have said that they had much sharper mind. Their brain fog had gone away following a carnivore diet. Essentially, it's just less carbs, less to no carbs is what can really, really help improve cognitive function, which seems paradoxical because the brain really relies on glucose. But what's happening with the no carbs is you are not feeding into that underlying root cause of inflammation. So you're not feeding bacteria, you're not feeding higher levels of insulin, you're not feeding cytokines, and you're not feeding damaging the mucosal lining further. So that is where you can improve that in terms of gut inflammation. Now, in terms of specific nutrients, we talked about methylation being crucially important for producing acetylcholine and dopamine, as well as clearing them, because that can be an issue as well. So now let's look at B vitamins, your methylated B vitamins. So for me, Thorn B complex, not the stress one, it's a little too high, but Thorn B complex in terms of easily accessible for the viewers listening to the podcast, I like the Thorn B complex from them, as well as here in Canada, the States could probably get it too, but they have different ones. AOR creates one called biofolate, which is extra 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate and B12 methylcobalamin. So these guys are going to really help promote that methylation cycle, getting those gears turning. And so that's something that you could look at as well to improve ADHD or ADD symptoms. B vitamins are important for everyone, but it's the specific ratios and the kinds, that's where we get into the nitty gritty. So I like the Thorn B complex because it contains niacinamide rather than niacin. So it helps flush because most of us are dealing with chronic levels of stress. So the niacinamide is going to help flush out the stress hormones. But you could use other ones as well. My go-to is one called, it's from Quicksilver Scientific, their methyl B complex. But in Canada, it's quite difficult to, you can't get it here in Canada, unfortunately. Don't have a French label. Boo. Anyways. So B vitamins go a really, really long way. Creatine. I've spoken about creatine many, many times, and you will read a lot of literature now on how creatine helps with cognitive function and brain health. That is because for you to recreate creatine within your body, it's very expensive. It costs a lot of B vitamins and it costs a lot of acetylcholine. So by supplementing creatine, you are sparing the methylation cycle, improving levels of B vitamins, improving levels of acetylcholine, and using that methylation geared towards other things for your health and wellness. So creatine go a very long way. And don't worry about the water weight. That's nonsense. Most people know it as muscle building. Yes, it does. It does help with muscle building. It helps with performance, ATP production, etc. But in terms of cognitive performance, it spares systems. So you have more resources that are able to be allocated to other avenues like cognitive performance. So creatine is a really good one. Now for directly going after dopamine, we're looking at things like mecanoperine, so the velvet bean. Once again, consult professional before doing this because you might not need that. You might need tyrosine. So when we look at how the chain of command goes for building dopamine, it goes L-dopa dopamine. Mecanoperine is L-dopa. So you're pretty much taking dopamine is how that works. Where L-tyrosine is a building block for it, but it's not like you're going to just take L-tyrosine and then all of a sudden have a bunch of dopamine. It's a reserve. So when you need that dopamine, you will build it. L-tyrosine also has a ton of other effects, so I highly recommend L-tyrosine. It really helps improve thyroid as well. One of the very simplistic mechanisms of that, the way I'll explain it, is dopamine is your healthy stress response. So the more dopamine you have, the less cortisol and the less thyroid you use. And the less cortisol you use, the better your thyroid is going to be. So this is why it's important to have dopamine. So this is where L-tyrosine, you'll read, can really improve the thyroid. That is one mechanism. So I highly recommend supplementing L-tyrosine if you are someone that experiences these symptoms. Then we, as mentioned previously, we got alpha GPC and choline CDP. They're both building blocks for acetylcholine, but what the literature shows and in my own experience is alpha GPC provides you more energy, physical energy, but yes, more focus, better muscle contractions. So taking it pre-workout is a great choice. And choline CDP offers more of that smooth focus. So if you have to sit down and really read a book, whichever, then I would recommend more choline CDP. Alpha GPC, I believe, is easier to find. They're going to both be great. So don't stress over which one you should use. But that is what I've learned in my experience, what I've been educated on, and taking them, that is what I've felt. NeuroPrime from ATP Labs is probably my most favorite one. It contains both L-tyrosine and alpha GPC as well as L-carnitine. Now, the reason the L-carnitine is in there is because L-carnitine We hear about fat burning, etc. In an oral form, it's very poor for that, but in oral form, it is great for improving the absorption of nootropics into the brain. So that is where I love NeuroPrime from ATB Labs. They used to be called something else, growth factor or something like that, or maybe it was growth factor and now it's NeuroPrime, vice versa. I don't know. Look up one of those names. I have some in my cupboard. I'll confirm later. But so that's a really, really good one there. And in terms of creatine, creatine is one of the most researched supplements out there. It's usually relatively safe. Once again, though, I still don't say cheap out. Creatine monohydrate is a little more expensive, but always go quality. Always go quality, because by going lesser quality, you're okay. The dosage just might not be as much. It might say it's 5 grams, but reality, you only get like 3. But then you got to worry about toxins, fillers, etc., impurities. So always go quality when you are investing in supplements, because if you are someone who says a supplement doesn't work for me, there are so many reasons as to why that supplement didn't work for you. It's not that it didn't work for you. You didn't work. You didn't let it work. What happened was you might have invested into a poor supplement that had a very low dosage, or there was something in there impeding it, causing it to do what it needed to do, kind of situation. So those are some great nutrients that you can use to help improve those ADHD symptoms, as well as ADD. You can also look at phosphatidylcholine. So as mentioned with that methylation cycle, when you look at all the gears turning, I won't get too intricate in this, but you have a PEMT gene. That's what creates phosphatidylcholine. That is a building block for so many important things: cellular health, cellular communication, liver health, biliary ducts. I could go on. But in terms of this, it also is a building block for acetylcholine. So phosphatidylcholine can help improve so many things at a cellular level, and just working its way through the chain of command, improving your ADHD and ADD symptoms. So that too, you'll see like choline bitartrate. That one's okay. There are worse things out there, but Body Bio phosphatidylcholine, Body Bio PC, is the best one out there. It has the 3 major forms in liposomal, very top quality. That's the one that I recommend when it comes to improving your phosphatidylcholine levels for whichever reason need being, whether it's cellular inflammation, chronic inflammation, or just trying to improve your cognitive performance. That one goes a long way. And then as mentioned with the dopamine, there's foods. I'm not going to get into the foods though. You can look that up, which foods provide more dopamine. But in terms of nutrients, we're looking at things like L-tyrosine, mecanoparines. There's other mechanisms, other nutrients like ginkgo biloba, however you say that, huperzine A1. Like there's a lot of nootropics that can really help as well. But I think in the beginning, just trying to address this, just start basic and simple. There's no reason to go to these crazy nootropics. Yeah, they're going to do great for you, but kind of get yourself into a better place first, and then start to dabble in these nootropics and just kind of push you to that next level. But once again, these things, there's always a negative feedback loop. Don't want to take something like alpha GPC forever, all the time in high doses. You want to take a break from it. L-tyrosine, there's a lot of controversy or debate, I shouldn't say controversy, debate about whether you should stop that or not. I don't think so. I think L-tyrosine is safe to take all the time, maybe not in super high doses, but tyrosine's in all your protein. So that one's super safe. Phosphatidylcholine, you could take, you could take that all the time, no matter what. Those ones are safe, so you don't have to worry there. What else? The mecanoparines you want to be careful of, because you can, as mentioned, if you refer to that dopamine series on my YouTube, the receptors will downregulate because it's trying to prevent you from going schizophrenic. Because if your body didn't do that, you took a bunch of mecanoparines, you could start hallucinating and see, and have schizophrenia. So you will downregulate receptors. So when it comes to nootropics, you want to cycle these things. But when it comes to dealing with like the gut inflammation, because that's the long-term solution. Long-term, if you address the root cause, you don't need to be taking mecanoparines and alpha GPC and all these things. You fix that root cause. Now, we're never going to be perfect though. So should we always have L-tyrosine? Sure. Should we maybe take some mecanoparines when you got a big event coming up or a big test? Sure. But you don't need them on the daily when you correct the issue at hand, whether that's the gut inflammation, whether that's the overgrowth, the dysbiosis in general, okay? Being on your phone too much, all that kind of stuff. So those are some of the nutrients you can use to address your ADD and ADHD symptoms. But ultimately, at the end of the day, addressing that root cause, spending less time on your phone, interacting with people more, laughing more, hugging more, like oxytocin. I'm not going to recommend that one, but that really helps with ADD and ADHD symptoms. Yes, you can supplement oxytocin, but you have to be very careful with that one. So I'm not going to speak on that, but just get it from spending time with people you love, people you enjoy, be around the right people, okay? Be in the right environment. That's going to make a huge difference. We're so focused on like what supplement to take and what food to eat. And this is what I've said to people. I was like, when was the last day you were actually happy for the whatever amount of hours you were awake for the day? And there's always a day where we have something that upset us, but there's a lot of people where every day there's something where they're super stressed about, whether it's work, whether it's their significant other, whether it's a sick family member or just family members in general, whether it's a poor living situation, whether it's financial, right? We are always upset. We're always stressed. We're always anxious. We're always angry. When was the last time you had a day where you just enjoyed the entire day? When you went out, I always say go out to the mountains because I'm from Alberta. I live in Calgary. We're really close to the mountains, so I'll just say it in this context, but it applies to boating in Florida, whatever. When was the last time you gone out to the mountains with somebody you enjoy and just spent the day laughing, conversing, enjoying, and relaxing, embracing everything around you? Those are going to be the biggest quote unquote supplements for improving any sort of symptom. And I have clients that will go away and they'll be super, super stressed. Some won't go away to the mountains because they're like, I don't know how to pack my food. I'm like, I don't care. I don't care. Bring some snacks, whatever. Just go there and have the time of your life. That is going to negate any damage a chocolate bar will do to you. That's going to negate any damage, potential damage, I should say, that a piece of cake is going to do to you. Just go out, enjoy your life. Try to be happy. Stay off your damn phone. Quit comparing things. Quit scrolling through Instagram. Quit going on TikTok. There's things that make you laugh on there. So I get a lot of laughs from TikTok. But that doesn't mean you should use that as your avenue to laugh, right? So hug people, all this kind of stuff. That's what I start to ask clients now. I'm like, oh, I missed this supplement or I didn't do this. I'm like, yeah, but did you laugh? Did you hug somebody? Did you smile? Right? Oh, well, yeah. There you go. I'm happy. Okay. That's what it is. Okay. So, but everybody wants to hear what supplement to take and what nutrition plan to follow and so on and so forth. So as mentioned, things like B vitamins, methylated forms, you got mecanoparines, you got alpha GPC, choline CDP, you got the things to address gut inflammation like aloe vera and deglycerinated licorice root, for example. So things along that nature. Those are all going to really help with your ADD and your ADHD symptoms. So once again, if you guys want me to elaborate more on things, don't hesitate to drop a comment below, shoot me a DM, whichever, because it is a quite complex topic and it is something that a lot of people deal with, ADHD specifically, but there are ways that we can really improve upon those symptoms naturally without medication. Am I demonizing medication? No, I'm not. Once again, I believe there's a time and a place for everything. But in the context of ADHD and like having to focus, there's many, many natural ways, whether it's meditating before, whether it's taking supplements, whether it's following keto, whichever it may be, there are many natural ways that you can improve these symptoms and really focus on your task. Now, getting your butt up to do that task, maybe that's where you need the medication. You don't. But if that's what it takes to actually get you up to do that task, to meditate, to follow a sound plan, to improve these symptoms, I'm all for it. All right. So I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. Take care, everybody.